Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Good afternoon, dear friends. Today we are in the Sutta Study regarding the Middle Length Discourses, number 151, which is called the Purification of Alms Food. And we have an unusually good, excellent group of people here in the space with us. I'm spinning the camera around so the Zoom audience can appreciate. We have this delightful group of visitors and friends and those from the Aranyabodhi Hermitage all arrived to join us in today's Sutta study. If you happen to be reading the sutta in this book, The Middle Length Discourses of the Buddha, it comes on page 1143. I don't need that one. I'm going to do a sharing of the screen. This sutta is somewhat an encyclopedia in one way because it gives a mention of 37 factors of awakening, among other points. And one could spend an entire month, an entire 6 months, or an entire 10 years just developing one's appreciation and mastery of the 37 factors of awakening. In this case, it's given in this context by way of a reference. And the basic idea of this sutta is a little bit more simple than that. Specifically, we have been speaking for the past month or so about paccavekkhana, or reflecting. This is the theme that we've chosen as a community here during Davasa to try to become more consistent in doing paccavekkhana every day and throughout the day, to be continuously reflecting. So there are different meanings or different context about this paccavekkhana, or reviewing. One way that we looked at was checking to see whether what we are thinking, saying, or doing is harmful or harmless. That we should be frequently checking. And if it's harmful, we should stop. If it's harmless, we can go on. So that's checking for the skillful and unskillful aspect. Another part of this checking is very close to the Chittanupassana in the foundations of mindfulness, the mindful contemplation of the mind, to be able to be aware of one's state of mind. Like, is the mind drowsy, or is the mind alert? Is the mind focused, or is the mind distracted? Is the mind boundless, referring to like the practice of the divine abidings, the boundless loving kindness? Or is the mind bounded, or just showing kindness to a selected few? Or is the mind unsurpassable, which would be the mind of a fully enlightened person, or is it surpassable? So anyway, being able to recognize what it's like to have the state of mind that you have at any point in time. That's the second use of this pachavekana, this, or even during meditation, to review what happened within the meditation, whether you obtained samadhi or not. And then another kind of pachavekana that we looked at is more like a reflection or contemplation of things which are universal truths. So you could say, all beings are subject to death. I have not gone beyond death. This fact should be reflected on again and again. So things which are universal realities should be reflected on. Okay, so that's another use. Now, here in this sutta that we're going to look at today, it is coming to the stages of the gradual training, and saying that we should see what parts of the gradual training have we accomplished, and which parts do we still need to work on. It even goes so far at the very end to have one of the bullet points is referring to the state of a non-returner who's a noble enlightened being who's not quite fully enlightened arahant, but just almost there. So recognizing if that's where they are, or else the last bullet point is the quality of a fully enlightened arahant. So you would say, well, am I enlightened or not? We should check and see, and strive accordingly. So with that context to explain why I gave this sutta for today, I'm going to read it and pause from time to time for discussions. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Then it was evening. The Venerable Sariputta rose from meditation and went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down to one side. The Blessed One said to him, Sariputta, your faculties are clear. The color of your skin is pure and bright. What abiding do you often abide in now, Sariputta? The answer, now, Venerable Sir, I often abide in voidness. It's emptiness. And the Buddha replies, good, Sariputta. Now indeed you often abide in the abiding of a great man, for this is the abiding of a great man, namely voidness. The footnote explains that voidness, or shunyata, is one of the liberations. There are different some liberations that are used referring to states of meditation, and some liberations that are referring to the full enlightenment of an arahant. It's almost like, through which gateway did that individual arrive at their full awakening? And the voidness is the insight of the emptiness, namely that this body or this mind, these aggregates, are empty of self, or whatever other experiences or phenomenon that one encounters as being empty of self. So this is an aspect of the realization of full awakening. And even after one is an arahant, I think it's implied here that Shunyata is an arahant at this point. He is regularly, I mean, what to do after you wake up? Well, your work is complete. So one part is that the fully enlightened arahants frequently dwell in samadhi, in the meditation, and they frequently dwell in the contemplation of emptiness. That is their place of abiding. Now the Buddha goes into his teaching. So, Sariputta, if a bhikkhu should wish, may I now often abide in voidness? He should consider thus: on the path by which I went to the village for alms, or in the place where I wandered for alms, or on the path by which I returned from the alms round, was there any desire, lust, hate, delusion, or aversion in my mind regarding forms cognizable by the eye? If by so reviewing he knows thus: on the path by which I went to the village for alms, or in the place where I wandered, or the path by which I returned, there was desire, lust, hate, delusion, or aversion in my mind regarding forms cognizable by the eye, then he should make an effort to abandon these evil, unwholesome states. But if by reviewing he knows thus: on the path by which I went to the village for alms, the place where I wandered, the path by which I returned, there was no desire, lust, hate, delusion, or aversion in my mind regarding any forms cognizable by the eye, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. I want to pause here for a moment. The going on the alms round is the livelihood of a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. You could say, in order to do what's necessary to provide for the nutriment or the maintenance of the body, a farmer needs to farm, an attorney needs to practice law, a person needs to practice their livelihood, their occupation. And what a monastic does is that they go with their alms bowl to the village. Typically, they would get up earlier in the morning while it's still cool. It might take a while to walk to the alms round or the place where there's families to offer. They would receive whatever food is given, and they would bring that food back. Having had their alms food and done a few the basic chores of cleanliness and care for their place of abiding, then they might spend the remainder of the day in contemplation or meditation. But what they had to do to get enough calories in the body, they had to go on the alms round. So it's a fact of life on the circle of rebirth in the conditioned world, that the beings are constantly feeding themselves. They're constantly taking up the nutriment. The food or the medicine is the nutriment of the body. And sense contact is the nutriment of consciousness, and so on. So people are putting themselves in a place that's got a lot of danger for what you like, what you don't like, getting what you want, not getting what you don't want, arranging. If there's something missing that you needed, you have to arrange to have it. If something is not adjusted just the right way, you have to make an adjustment so that you can get it just the right way. And so we are then like tempted to be constantly doing things in order to make everything just right for the continued existence as a living being. And since a person who's an uneducated person who hasn't heard the Dhamma may think that that's all there is, that that's the highest value in life, is to carry on with existence, perhaps to get a little bit more than you need so that you can feel safe, that in case of a rainy day, you'll still have some. So then you have to build up a certain amount of wealth, and then you have to have some protection. You have to build a wall to protect your wealth, and then you may be having a family and children, so that after this life that your line can be carried down, and you hope that the nutriment that you have built up and secured will be able to be passed along to the next generation, and so on. So this is all about when lay people, householders, go on, they're equivalent to the alms round, practicing their livelihood. They're doing it for this purpose. They're doing it to get more life. And the danger is, if you spent your entire life trying to get more life, then when the moment of death comes, the mind is not ready to die. The mind wants to go on living. And if you want to go on living, that's what you can get. You can be reborn and continue on the cycle of rebirth. So then when the bhikkhu goes on the alms round, they need to be especially mindful, because they will see a lot of things along the way on the alms round that could give rise to desire or aversion or delusion. They could see some beautiful people of the gender that they like. They could see a store with a lot of toys and knickknacks in it. They could go by a place where there's music is being played, and they might hear a bit of music. Or they could go by a place where a politician is giving a speech, and they could start to have feelings about that. There's so many different variety of things that we will encounter along the way while getting the alms food. And even when the people are giving the alms food, there's such a danger of greed that if they offer a particular kind of food, and the monk could think, oh, I don't usually get this kind of food. Let me stock up and take a lot, because I might not get this type of food again tomorrow or later on. And so it's a temptation to greed. Or they might get food that's different from the kind of food that they're used to, and they could get form some dislike if it's not the food that they expected to get. Or they could get nothing at all. And if they got nothing at all, then either they feel glad and happy because there's time for meditation, or else they feel anxious and worried because of fear. So this is why I believe the Buddha starts the sutta from that particular aspect about the alms round, The whole sutta is not about the alms room, but that's the setup. I would like to ask if there's any comments or questions, especially those who might think about how challenging it is to keep the purity of the mind while doing your job. Is it easy or difficult to keep the mind absolutely clear and pure while you're working at your job, trying to earn a living? Or any other question about this section? Okay, Richard.
Thank you, Raya. I hope what I'm about to say doesn't sound controversial, but there's a sutta where the Buddha describes descent into emptiness, sunyata. And he says the reason for going to live as a monastic is to get away from all the distractions of the village life. And then eventually you, as a monastic, you go away to a secluded place in the forest under a tree or an empty hut or a cave or something, to get away from the reduced but distractions of the monastic life. Okay, as you're descending, each is you're descending more and more into emptiness. So you're emptying out the distractions of the village life, then you're emptying out the extra little distractions of the monastic life, etc. Then you're in the forest and you sit down to meditate, and the Buddha says, and then only the earth remains, because you're sitting down. And in the ancient time, they actually did open eye meditation. There's no place anywhere in any sutra where it says, okay, now close your eyes. It's not there. So you're sitting down, and the only thing left in front of you is just the ground in front of you. That's why it says only the ground remains. And you forget all the variegatedness of the forest, because the forest also has that, the wind is blowing through the trees, maybe a nice view, animals are making noise, whatever, right? So just the earth remains. And then further descent into voidness is entering into the formless realm. So Buddha doesn't go into the details about the jhanas, but he kind of just leaps ahead, So you set aside the four lower elements and you enter into boundless space, okay, where you're not bound anymore by a body, because a body has limitations. So I don't want to go into complete discussion of that, but I just want to point out that it might be quite difficult as a householder type person trying to live a regular life and go work a job and all kinds of things like that. There are examples of householders that attained no returner, which requires that you attain certain levels of this formless meditation, generally speaking, but they probably had restricted their lifestyles tremendously. You know what I mean? So that even though they're still at home or whatever, they're probably spending a lot of time meditating privately, maybe in a little private room or something at home or whatever like that. Or they frequently go to where the monastics are and maybe sit in meditation with them and stuff like that. But it's kind of like trying to run in two directions at the same time. If you think you're going to live a regular household life and make this type of advancement. I'm not saying you can't make any type of advancement in Buddhism. I'm talking about that type of advancement in Buddhism. I think it's very refined. So the Buddha was asked, how does his mind abide, normally? And he says, I tend toward voidness. Or voidness is not a good word. I tend towards emptiness, And so this idea of emptiness is very fundamental, I would say, to understanding the Buddha's teaching. Anyways, that's what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Yes, this inclination of the mind towards emptiness, and then when there's the opportunity, leaving the village behind and going into the forest, which is empty of the village, and then within the forest, considering just the forest, considering just the earth element, and going up progressively to letting go of different levels of perception of different kinds of objects. In this teaching, which actually I think is still very much directed towards, it could be for a householder or a trainee or one who has some awakening. He's talking about the process, and he is pointing out in a realistic way that even monastics may go to the village to walk for alms. So they may leave the forest and go to the village on a daily basis, walking for alms, and then leave the village and go back to the forest for contemplation. So when they go for alms, they have a chance to test how much has been realized by them, to see whether contacting the things in the village is going to cause desire and lust. The commentary says those are really the two synonyms of the same thing, or else hate and aversion. The commentary says that's two words for the same thing, or delusion. So that's greed, hate, and delusion, the three roots that keep us tied into samsara. Are they present in the mind or not? And then if one is able to recognize that that is present, then it says here one should make the effort to abandon that state. And when we're householders or beginners in the Dhamma, or people who have not yet really become very well established, it may be that we have to make those efforts again and again and again and again. And sometimes we can abandon those states a little bit, but it's very unique occurrence. Saying, if I at least been able to give up some of my hatred, have I at least been able to give up some of my desire? Or have I been able, at least for a minute, to be able to give up desire? Or maybe at least for a week to give up desire. And so those states, when a person realizes or notices that the greed, hate, and desire are not present, it could be that that beautiful, refined, and wonderful state is something that happens temporarily while you're on a retreat at a retreat center or at a temple, or if you meet an accomplished meditation master who is enlightened and under the awesome impact of the personality of that great teacher, then you feel like while you're sitting in their presence, it's as if greed, hatred, and delusion was gone. But maybe for you that state was temporary, and then afterwards, when you go back to the village, those states may come back. But we keep on striving to try to expand the portion of our life which is free of those negative states. There's a term that I read about once in connection with mental health that said even a person who is psychotic, extremely mentally ill, sometimes they experience what the doctor called an island of sanity, which is sometimes they're not acting crazy. Sometimes they're sane. And a skillful therapist would notice the moments of sanity and point them out and encourage and recognize them, so that then the patient can recognize these as good states and pay attention to the good states so they expand. Instead of always paying attention to the sick states. If you emphasize with sickness, then the sickness gets more powerful. If you emphasize wellness, the wellness gets more powerful. So for those of us who are not yet enlightened, it's like we are a mental patient. But sometimes we might experience island of sanity, moments when these factors are either very much weakened or else disappeared completely. So the Buddha is saying we should review. That's the Paccavekkhana. Are these states present or not present? And then I'll go back and continue reading the sutta. Again, on the path by which I went to the village for alms and so on, regarding sounds cognizable by the ear, odors cognizable by the nose, flavors cognizable by the tongue, tangibles cognizable by the body, mind objects cognizable by the mind. If by reviewing he knows on the path that I went for alms, there was desire, lust, hate, delusion, or aversion in the mind regarding any of those types of objects, then he should make the effort to abandon those evil, unwholesome states. But if on reviewing he knows there was no desire, lust, hate, delusion, or aversion, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. So far, it's significant that this training is telling us to pay attention to the process with the senses. We were discussing this in our group over the past week or longer about how for some people who are so intellectual and so involved with concepts and noticing their internal emotions or their internal feelings, but they don't really pay attention to what's happening just at that moment where there's a contact through the sense faculty, that there's an external object, an internal sensory faculty, and the consciousness or the capacity to cognize that type of object. It comes together, there's a contact, and then the Vedana or the feeling or the sensation arises from that. And from that feeling or sensation, depending on the state of our practice, either we're off to the races with a lot of unwholesome manifestations like desire, hate, lust, and delusion, or else we're not. And just the sensation, the contact is just a contact, the eye is just the eye, the visual object is just a visual object, the feeling is just a feeling, and it does not cause those other states to take off. So those who, for whom you live in your head all the time being intellectual, the Buddha suggests to try to be more aware and alert to sensations. I'm going to comment that if the sun is difficult or hot on this side, I have the belief that this side of our sala is more thoroughly shaded and maybe a bit more comfortable. So it's just an option. Any further comments or questions so far? I'm about to go into a whole other section. The next two, okay, Richard again.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to unmute. So I went unmuted. So anyways, just talking about that section where Buddha says, where there is no desire, lust, hate, delusion, or aversion in my mind, right? in Sutta number 43, towards the end, this is dealt with. And what, friends, is the way in which states are one in meaning and different only in name? Lust is a maker of measurement. Hate is a maker of measurement. Delusion is a maker of measurement. In a bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed, these are abandoned, cut off at the root, and made like a palm stump, done away with, so that they are no longer subject to future rising. Of all the kinds of immeasurable deliverance of mind, the unshakable deliverance of mind is pronounced the best. Now that unshakable deliverance of mind is empty of lust, empty of hate, and empty of delusion. So that kind of description that the Buddha is giving here in 151, if a person examines their mind and sees that those things aren't there, they're at a very, very high, level, possibly even an arahant, but at least a no returner.
Mhm.
I would say. Anyways, that's the only point I wanted to make about
Thank you.
that.
Sutta
Just to
43,
clarify what those things mean. Yes, it's
that's
towards the end of Sutta.
Chula Vedala Sutta, right?
No, it's a Mahavedala.
Mahavedala Sutta. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's another
Yeah.
wonderful sutta. We may be able to discuss it at some point. So now the next two sets are related to obtaining jhana or obtaining samma samadhi. It's always following exactly the same format, so I'm not going to repeat the whole refrain each time. But this is paragraph 9 in Bhikkhu Bodhi's version. The bhikkhu should consider, are the 5 cords of sensual pleasures abandoned in me? The cord that's like a string, a tie, a leash. If you were like an animal tied to a post by a leash, then you've got that cord. Regarding sensual pleasure, the Buddha said that pretty objects are not the same thing as sensuality. That sensuality is the delight and craving in respect to those pretty objects. And so it is exactly the delight and the craving that becomes the cord that will cause a person to be attached to those attractive or those lovable objects, those pleasant objects. Now, at the practical level, I think that the physical seclusion is part of moving towards cutting those 5 cords of sensual pleasure. So when we've gone to a retreat center or to our cave or under the root of a tree in order to meditate, we have turned off our Facebook, we've turned off the music, we're finished with eating for the rest of that day, and we are not sleeping on a soft and luxurious bed, and we have given up on trying to adjust the thermostat or open the window or close the window to make the temperature exactly perfect the way we want it to be. We are just made ourselves physically removed from objects that could be a distraction, and that's part of the help that enables us perhaps to discover more clearly what we've got as the internal mental factors of desire and lust. So like if every time you want some chocolate, you just take some chocolate, you might never notice I want chocolate. Because you only, before you even were conscious of wanting chocolate, it's already in your mouth. So then by having that physical seclusion, you have a chance to see it in the mind. And then when you can see it in the mind and even tolerate a circumstance where there's not an opportunity to satisfy those kinds of craving, then you can confront that and then have a chance to separate and finally let go and to realize those times that process of wanting and getting and continuously making adjustments to keep our senses all satisfied. We have a chance to come away from that. In the formula for the first jhana, it says in Pali, vivikcheva kamehi, and that means secluded from the objects of desire. Kama is desire. Kama in the plural is referring to the objects of desire, the diverse objects of the five senses especially. And so secluded from sensuality in connection to those objects. So it's a precondition for entering jhana to work with gaining that seclusion. If you know that you have not yet abandoned them, then you have to abandon them. You will not be able to get sama samadhi until you abandon the kama guna, the cords of sensual pleasure. But if you have, then please go ahead and keep practicing. Then I'm going to take these two paragraphs together. Again, Sariputta, a bhikkhu should consider thus, are the five hindrances abandoned in me. That would be sensual desire, aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness, and skeptical doubt. In the description of the jhana, the next phrase is vivekcha akusalehi dhamehi, the unskillful states of mind. So in the first jhana, or in right samadhi, right meditation, one is secluded from unwholesome states of mind. And that's referring to these five hindrances in this case. So I have to tell you something funny. When I read this sutta, I immediately recognized that these two paragraphs were about jhana, and that the subsequent one was about stream entry, and the subsequent set was about the path of practice. And I was feeling so clever about it. And then I read Bhikkhu Bodhi's footnotes and found out that I only just needed to look in the footnotes and I would have found out the same information. So it's affirming that so these two are for entering into sama samadhi. There's a fair amount of work that we've done already before we were able to obtain full concentration. We have obtained some kind of basic right view at some level, at least. We've understood something about causation. We've realized the importance of the right thought or the right motivation, and we have the wish or the intention for the mind to be free from greed, for renunciation, free from greed, or for letting go, realize that we desirable to have that state of mind, for kindness, free, non-hatred, full of kindness, which is free from hatred, and for compassion, which is free from cruelty. So we've developed those states. We've perhaps have been practicing the boundless meditations to pervade the whole world with loving kindness and so on. And then we have also taken care of our fundamental ethics and Shila so that our behavior is in accord with those good intentions. and we've started to be able to recognize the states of mind as far as being skillful and unskillful, and started the work of purification to when we see. And if you had a guest who was a visitor in your house and that person was really toxic for your family and they were causing nothing but trouble, being harmful to your peace of mind, even possibly harmful to the whole household, or even if you had a house guest and you realize that person is a danger to the household, you wouldn't keep them as a guest. You would invite them to leave if you could. And so the same way, if there's certain kinds of thoughts that we may choose to make ourselves ill by thinking certain kinds of thoughts, but if we know we're doing that and we realize we have the power, we can stop and let go of thinking those kind of thoughts and think the types of thoughts that make us happier and better. All of that work is sort of like in part of the run up to the Sama Samadhi and the beginning of Samadhi, or concentration or unification of the mind. And then with these two factors, to my understanding in the sutta, these two factors are sort of signifying the whole process of Sama Samadhi, of the jhana meditation. And I'll pause again for a moment to see if there are any comments or questions about these factors. We hear of the 5 hindrances from the very first time we ever went to a class in Buddhism, or at least within the first 5 or 10 classes when we took our introduction to Buddhism. The teacher must have told us about the 5 hindrances. And there's a way in which people who have been practicing for a long time might think that the hindrances are like just a basic training for children or something like that. But it's a very profound teaching, and we, according to this, we should ever continuously be mindful and be reviewing and checking. Every morning, every night, we should check, are these hindrances present in the mind or not? Do you have a question? No? Okay. So not to neglect having, had made some progress in the Dhamma, we shouldn't neglect to continue on with checking for the existence or the absence of these states. Okay, I'm going to keep going ahead. The next one is the bhikkhu should consider, are the 5 aggregates affected by clinging fully understood by me? Pachupadana Kanda. If they're not fully understood, he should strive to understand them. If they are fully understood, then he can abide happy and glad, training day and night in wholesome states. So the Upadana Kanda, or this is the basic analysis that the Buddha gave of the phenomena that can be taken up by a person as an aspect of the self. So if a person identifies with their material body as being themselves, it's like the upadana both means clinging and it also means taking up. So they have picked it up and incorporated that as being an aspect of themselves. And if they've, to whatever extent they've done that, then they're in a lot of trouble because the body is not reliable. The feelings, states, the pleasant, unpleasant feelings, those reactions, if you take it up as a part of yourself, an aspect of the self, you will be in trouble. So some childish people think that if I feel pleasure, like I see the ice cream and I feel pleasure, and then I have to have it. Or if I am a young man or a young woman and I fall in love, I have to have that person. Or if something happens and I don't like it, I have to make a noise and protest and complain about it. There's a person who thinks because they have a feeling, they have to act out with their feeling. Now later we come to be more like reserved or able to refrain from acting out on all of our feelings, so we can be a little bit more wise about it. But internally, a person can still, identify that their authentic self is to be found in their feelings. So the Buddha said, don't take it up. It's not you. If you look for happiness there, you'll be disappointed, right? Through that identification. Perceptions, that's how we identify and name the various phenomena that we encounter. So depending on what was going on with the senses and the contact and the feeling and the underlying tendencies, like what we've learned before, then one may recognize different kinds of objects as being like the blue of the blue sky, and or the green of the green trees, or the brown of the robes. So a person can be identified with their ability to perceive those distinctions. If they make that a self, they're in trouble. Oh, there's a question. Very good.
Such a thing as a wholesome desire?
Yes. They usually use the word chanda as an ethically neutral term for desire. And the unwholesome desire for like sensual pleasure can be substituted with the wholesome desire for awakening, or for moving towards more skillful states, or the desire for freedom from affliction, even the desire for awakening. And so then as a transitional stage, the desire for wellness, the desire for true happiness, the desire for one's true welfare, or even in loving kindness, the desire or the intention, may all beings be well, happy, and secure, may all beings be happy. Those are wholesome desires. Now, at the very end, when it comes to enlightenment, it's my understanding that desire for nibbana becomes an obstacle because it creates some restlessness. And so if you want it, you can't have it because it's making the mind restless. So there has to be a point in which then desire is completely let go of. But in the transitional stage along the way, a desire, which is usually used with the Pali word such as chanda, which means a wish, can be wholesome. Yeah. And then a similar idea to that, there's an idea like a determination. There's like making a decision, making a resolve. So you say, I'm going to give up chocolate for the rest of the week. That would be like making a resolution. Or else, if we make the resolution, I am going to protect the truth and practice for peace. That's sort of related to a wholesome desire. It's like it's a decision that this is my intention, and then the mind inclines towards that direction. So all those things can be good. But the clinging, where you're taking it up and you're identifying, this is me, this is myself, that my ego is bound up with these qualities, then you've taken a wrong turn. If you get your ego involved, say, like, I want to practice loving kindness for all beings, and then I say, I'm the most lovingest person in the whole room. I have more metta than anybody, or something like that. You can see how the I started to come into it, and it started to become like perverted, and it's not really real metta. So real loving kindness is simply the intention or the thought for the welfare of beings, including oneself and others. But it doesn't have that egotistical quality because it doesn't have that identification. So the Upadana Kanda is about when something has been taken up and made part of our personality that we subsequently identify and cling to as being a self, and then feel upset and grieved and disturbed if it changes because we feel like we lost part of ourself. The other kanda is sankhara, which is sometimes translated in terms of volitional formations are closely related to karmic intention, the deeds that we do that have a karmic result. Sankhara also has a much wider meaning of all kinds of conditionality. In this context, I go with Venerable Analio, who classifies it with volitional formations, and then the consciousness itself, which knows all these things, but also has an ability of creating a self. Consciousness is able to, vijnana is able to recognize the division between what is an object. Okay, so this is the microphone, and this is not the microphone. So consciousness sees like the edge of the microphone and is aware of the purpose of the microphone, knows the color of the microphone, and even like if I've looked away, the concept may still exist that there's a microphone over there. And so in effect, the consciousness has created some kind of an essence, the essence of microphone. And the whole thing, not just this part or this part or this part or the parts inside, but all of it together has a compactness of its essential identity. We do this with objects, and we also do it with ourselves, of creating some kind of a compactness of an essential identity that is continuity over time. And it's because of this aspect of consciousness that doesn't just know stuff, it also is like a creating identities, which it then knows the identities which it has created, and that's where the danger is. So coming to understand this is a precursor to entering onto the stream entry path. At the stream entry path, one loses 3 fetters or 3 bonds, which ties to sankhara. And one of the first 3 fetters is called Sakkaya Ditthi, which is the view or the doctrine that sees a self in any one of the aggregates. So this is so first you obtain samadhi in this sequence, and then you can come to stream entry. This is, I think, a really good and important training to understand, like, what's the point of samadhi? Why should we go to such effort to be able to get samadhi? It's because the samadhi is the preparation that then opens the way and is creating a situation where there's the possibility of stream entry. And then once the person has obtained stream entry, they will no, even if they're reborn several more times, they wouldn't be reborn in a woeful state. And there's only going to be, it said 7 rebirths before they would attain their final full awakening. So a person who has stream entry is deeply, profoundly, it's unbelievable to say how different it is to say, having stream entry, you're on the way, no matter how many twists and turns happen, you're going to reach the destination. It's like it's a sure thing, it's a promise. And so this is why we ought to have, if we don't have stream entry, we should be practicing to get stream entry. And according to the sutta, that's how to practice. The next 7 bullets in this are the Bodhipakya Dhammas, the wings to awakening. And I don't have time to really go through them in detail. That may be a different class or even maybe a future Vasa. But I want to point out that, okay, these dhammas are these factors. According to this sutta, this is what you ought to be practicing with after you gain stream entry path, up until the time you're a fully enlightened arhat. During that time, you are considered as a trainee. And this is your work, your activity, your goal. It should be like your world. It should be in and out among all of these sets of training factors, these useful methods, useful ideas for understanding our experience and for continuing that work of purification. And so the quiz that's been given in the next set, one should check oneself, say, do I have this factor or not? I'm just going to read off the 5 sets. Now they're not given in sequence from the first one to the last one. They're given in numerical sequence. They're given 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 4, 4, 4, 5, 7, 8. 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 7, 8. So they're given in the order from a list of 4 to a list of 8. There are the 4 establishments of mindfulness. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mental states, mindfulness of the dhammas. Then the 4 right efforts, which is almost exactly the same as the 6th point on the Eightfold Noble Path, which is samavayama, making right effort. So samapadana, so make the effort to prevent unskillful states from arising in the mind. Make the effort to abandon an unskillful state once it has arisen. Make the effort for the arising of skillful states. Make the effort for sustaining and increasing the arisen skillful state. These things, you don't have to be as in stream entry in order to appreciate these teachings or to make the effort to work with these teachings. But I will say that it must be a completely different level once you have those, once you have stream entry, then the significance, the importance, and the power of these teachings is quite different. Maybe it's the difference between being outside the restaurant and studying the menu, or being inside the restaurant eating the dinner. There's the difference between how you might be practicing these things. Like from the outside, maybe you'll never feel that you're able to get to 100% on any of these things, even though you can get it a little bit. The 4 iddhipadas are the basis of spiritual power. Is called intention or chanda, effort or virya. chitta, or consciousness, and the skill of analysis, or vimamsa. So if you're practicing to empower your practice, this is a different set of factors that could be developed. The next one is the 5 spiritual faculties, the indriyas. We see the indriyas spoken of very often in connection with balancing our practice. There's saddha, or confidence, or you could say faith or confidence, effort, or virya, mindfulness, sati, unification of the mind, or samadhi, and wisdom, or panya. They're called balancing factors because saddha and panya are kind of like 2 ends of the spectrum. Once you've completely realized the wisdom for yourself, maybe you don't need to depend as much on saddha. But if you've not yet realized the wisdom for yourself, if you have very good saddha that can help to carry you along, the effort, or virya, is good for activating, and the concentration is good for coming to stillness. So those 2 are opposites. So on a particular time, you could see I need more activation, or I need more stillness, and adjust according. And then mindfulness is in the middle, and you can't have too much mindfulness. You always use the mindfulness to see what's going on with the other factors, and which factor perhaps can be increased in order to balance my practice. The next set is called 5 strengths. And this is exactly the same list, but it's at a increased level, at the level that's related to awakening. The next set is called the factors of awakening, 7 factors of awakening, which is a progressive set. You start with mindfulness. Mindfulness leads to investigation of dhammas. Investigation of dhammas arouses energy. With energy comes piti, or joy, or joyful interest. Joyful interest mellows out into tranquility of the body and mind. The tranquility supports the concentration, or the unification of mind, the samadhi, and the unification of the mind supports equanimity. And all of these cumulative factors, when you've built up to the recipe where all of those factors are in place and they're all functioning and working well, then you're at a good place for awakening. And then the last set is the Noble Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. I'm going to say that one who is not yet feeling confident to claim stream entry or stream entry path, nevertheless can practice with these 7 sets. And it's a whole world of useful, beneficial ideas that can use to anchor and frame the things that you may experience in life and the things you may experience in your meditation practice. I think I'll pause here. I'm probably going to go at least 10 minutes over time. But questions or comments about the usefulness of these Bodhipakya Dhammas? Oh, here. I'm going to I'm going to put a link in the chat. Okay. Okay, here's the chat. Here's a link. This is a lovely article in Sutta Central that gives a very straightforward, uncomplicated list of sutta links that will show you the significance of these 37 factors and tips about how to develop them. So if you wanted to take a course in that, you could just push the link that I just put in the chat there. So another significance of the factors, these 37 factors or these 7 sets, is that in several places the Buddha had pointed out what are the essential teachings which ought to be properly represented and remembered, and what is extraneous or possibly doubtful, possibly not part of my teachings. So if you hear somebody who claims to be a Buddhist teacher and they're teaching you something and you're like not so sure because you haven't heard this before, you could try to find out if you can fit that teaching into the 37 sets. Now, I heard this more simplified with my teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, said, you really ought to be able to fit it into the Eightfold Noble Path. If it's nowhere to be found in the Eightfold Noble Path, then it's probably not that important. But at least, the Buddha was trying to lay out a system that could be handed down from generation to generation without becoming distorted or confused. And that's the other purpose of this set, and the purpose why it's meaningful to check our practice in the context of this set. I may just go ahead to the last 2 points, which are said according to the commentary. Let me see. To be the mark of a non-returner, I think, or the mark of an arahant. Sharing the screen. So he should consider our serenity and insight developed in me. That's shamatha and vipassana. And then the last one is our true knowledge and deliverance are realized in me. So the arahant is the one who has fully realized true knowledge and deliverance. Even though he's already realized them, he may continue with the reviewing knowledge to look within himself and see that, like in the past, true knowledge and deliverance were not realized in me, and now they are realized in me. So this is the kind of review that's done by a a fully enlightened arahant. I'm opening Bhikkhu Bodhi's footnote. So the section on serenity insight is applicable to all stages, but can be seen as fully actualized by the non-returner striving for arahantship. And then true knowledge and deliverance signifies the attainment of the path and fruit of arahantship. The caution that we have as ones who are not yet fully enlightened is to have, I believe it's okay to have some type of a concept about the significance of true knowledge and deliverance. And having a concept, even if it's not perfect, helps to guide us and keep our orientation on the correct path to know, are we getting closer to that or are we wandering away from that? The danger is if we've not actually realized this for ourselves, the concept we form could be not quite correct. And then we could, based on an imperfect or a wrong understanding of it, be going off in a bad direction, or else be developing some kind of a greed and trying in a selfish way to get something, whereas the path of training is really not quite about getting or gaining or acquiring. It's not something that we do at Upadana, that we've acquired true knowledge and insight, and then I can put it on like a special robe or a halo or a badge or something I can put on saying that my ego possesses this quality, because it becomes moot. So that would be a kind of a ridiculous statement to say that. But it can be meaningful to read the sutras that give a taste or a flavor, like what it's like, or even if you met a fully enlightened arhat, what would that person be like? And it can, I think this can be helpful in our practice to make it real and to keep our motivations up. The same way, serenity and insight, that's like a gradual development. Maybe at our level, we've got like 10% serenity and insight, or maybe after working on it for a few years, I've got 20% serenity and insight. And it would be after many factors have shifted and changed, and a lot of effort and development, that finally the tank of serenity and insight could be completely, filled up to the top, so that is something that that there would be like no part of me that was not engaged with serenity and insight. That's the calmness by the losing track of forgetting all kinds of traces of greed, and the insight by losing all kinds of delusion and coming to the true knowledge of seeing things as they really are. The knowledge of the destruction of the taints, culminating in the knowledge of the destruction of ignorance. So this is what I have to say about the sutta, and I would like to invite any further comments or questions, if anybody can see how the structure of the sutta might be useful for you, or if anybody here in the room would be happy to add a comment or a question.
Blessed one, who is in the Blessed One the Blessed One, the Blessed One.
Mhm.
You can say, Lord Buddha says this. Lord Buddha says this.
Okay, the question is why it's translated as the Blessed One. So the Pali word is called Bhagava. So if they use the Pali word Buddha, which means awakened, or the awakened one, then Bhikkhu Bodhi translated as Buddha or as awakened one. And so the term Bhagava is conveying it's our relationship of respect and awesome admiration for that person who's a Bhagava. And some translations translate it as the Lord, which has a kind of maybe a Christian or a Western meaning that is not quite what we want to say. And Bhikkhu Bodhi chose to translate as the Blessed One. Yeah. Richard, let's just wait another couple of minutes and see if somebody else will raise a hand. Do you have anything to add about this sutta? Is it a useful sutta to know?
I think Maureen is raising her hand.
Okay, great. I'll hear from Maureen, and then I'm going to call on Venerable Kachayana.
It's two parts to this. Is it essential to be a Buddhist to be enlightened? Or is it all the teachings that help you be like that? And the reason I ask that question is that when you were saying, do you know anybody who really impressed you? And it was my grandmother. She was the most selfless person and kind that I knew. She had next to nothing, and she had a very hard life, but she was like a magnet for people. And with the little that she was able to offer people, like a cup of tea, she did that, to the milkman. In those days, the milkman came on his rounds, and the bread man delivered bread and things like that. But she was the most selfless, loving person, and her presence, she was so calm. It was a way that she behaved. It wasn't that she'd gone through any of all this long thing. She just had a very hard life, but that's what she was like. And I just that was what all I wanted to say and ask you.
Thank you. That's a beautiful question. So, Buddhism as an idea of a religion maybe was not even an idea until Christianity came along with the missionaries, and I had to create something that was more like a religion to be able to stand up to Christianity. That before that, like it was just the Dhamma, and those who were practicing the Dhamma in accord with the Dhamma. The Buddha, who was a Sammasambuddha, who was able to establish a tradition, knowledge about how to awaken, as well as the Vinaya and the order of monks. So then there are those who are practicing within that system, trying to faithfully recall and remember those instructions that were set forth to practice according to that way, and to realize that's called Shravakas, or listeners. So those who are listeners are developing in that way. Someone who's called a Pacceka Buddha, sometimes called a silent Buddha or a private Buddha, would very often not be what you would call a Buddhist, because they're not a follower of a Sammasambuddha. They're somebody who never met a Sammasambuddha, didn't hear of it, but they were just practicing and they realized for themselves. So that may be, there may be many, who knows, there may be hundreds of thousands of Pacceka Buddhas who realized for themselves before you found one who was a Sammasambuddha, who both realized it and also had the skill in teaching in order to be able to explain it to make it into a system and a practice that so many others could follow. Yeah, I think that there certainly are saints in the world who are not at all Buddhist. And I think there are also Buddhas in the world who are not Buddhist in the sense that they didn't meet a Sama Sambuddha, but they just became enlightened on their own effort. I'm passing the mic to Venerable Kachayana.
Thank you, Aya.
Can she get anything? What was the answer?
Okay. So yes, there's just a further question of the grandmother. Yes. So can she get enlightened? Was the question from the room.
It's kind of like a technicality that I've heard it said that during the time when the Buddhism is alive, that the sasana is alive, that you wouldn't have people who got enlightened on their own. But I don't know if they were conceiving of different parts of the world where people never met, never encountered, never had a chance to hear about the teachings of our Buddha because of living in a place where those teachings had never been heard of.
The fact of stream entry, four factors of stream entry, one is hearing from another.
Yes.
Someone doesn't hear from another. Pieces of Buddha. One of the four factors of entering stream.
It's to become an arahant, but to become a Pacceka Buddha. Can there be a Pacceka Buddha during the time that the Buddha Sasana, the teachings of the Buddha, have not yet been forgotten, but perhaps in some part of the world where nobody has ever heard of them? I'll defer the answer to that. You want to make another comment? Again, is the question is this format of this teaching useful? And what should we do about it?
Is the mic working?
Don't think so. I'm just checking.
Is the mic working? Check, check.
Yeah, it seems to be working.
Okay. This is greater love and participation about what I'm going to say, which I'm going to try to say something for this saying something. It's not that I had such a wonderful comment. But I think it's useful. Especially I guess I'm remarking on the purification of alms food part. The idea that this is sort of, if you're walking for alms food, you're supposed to be actually free of all these things. Free of greed, hatred, and delusion, state, delusion, aversion, right up to the end of living in voidness, and that's how you purify the alms food. So just as one who lives on alms, that's a strong reflection to think, have I actually done that or not? As we appreciate the alms food, and we wish for it to be that benefit for us and for those who also have as well. And to what extent have we managed that? But then that's part of the reflection, I think also it's sort of the motivation to care for ourselves and others, and seeing that connection of the offering and living and that. And so that training actually gives it a certain strength. And then, yeah, when it's sort of one version of the gradual training here. This one is already starting, after the point of, it's not mentioning the sila so much. This is someone who's already a bhikkhu, who's already practicing with the restraint of the Patimokkha, and often the gradual training starts with just basics of sila as the foundation. Here we're starting with the mindfulness while walking through the village, seeing what arises in the mind, restraint of the senses, restraining them from desire, lust, delusion, etc. And then, we have just this continuation and this progression. It's helpful. I appreciate, in general, all of the teachings on the gradual training. Actually, that's one of my favorite teachings of the Buddha, because it makes it accessible, it makes it possible. On the one hand, there's the far end of that, which is a very high bar and it's inspiring, but doesn't seem so close. But on the other hand, there's the starting place that one can actually feel like, yes, I could begin there. And then I can see all the steps from here to there and believe that it's possible. So I appreciate there being that progression here. And I do find that a useful way of bringing things.
Richard, I'll invite you to take the last comment.
Question from the
Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more question. Okay, Richard, I invite you to have the second to the last comment, and then Venerable Jitindra will be the last.
Thank you. This sutra is divided into 4 different groups of items. 8 items to be abandoned, 1 to be fully understood, 8 to be developed, and 1 to be realized. And but there's something very curious about it, which is specifically the last one to be realized. If one has realized that means one is an arahant. And for one who is an arahant, Buddha says their training is complete. So the Pali word for being translated as training here is anusikana, I think it is. And I think that translation is not quite correct. I think that translation, the correct translation is more like one who has completed the training and therefore can rest happy and glad in wholesome states. And that each one of these 18 different items are not meant to be in terms of, if you realize that you've completed them, like stages along the path, but if you truly have completed that, you would have attained arahantship. And I think the reason that the Buddha is bringing this up to Sariputta is because in the beginning, Sariputta says that he's abiding in emptiness. But one can reach this emptiness abiding without fully becoming an arahant. So I think what Buddha is explaining to him, because Sariputta goes on to become one of the main teachers of the Dharma under the Buddha, is that there's going to be disciples who can attain this emptiness, but it's important for them to understand that don't get stuck there. You know what I mean? Push on, go for arahantship. And the way to analyze oneself and to see if one has attained arahantship is to examine any one of these 18 items and see if you've completely, mastered that, then you've attained arahantship, and your work, right, your training is finished. Anyways, I may be completely wrong, but you know, that's my insight into the sutta. The other thing was, you said something about how to practice for stream entry, and I may have missed a word or two there. I'm not sure. Can you explain exactly what you meant by that?
Well, to my idea, and as I was taught, one who has gained any one of the three, breaking any one of the three fetters, the first three fetters, would be said to have gained the stream entry path. And those three fetters are the belief in rites and rituals, the skeptical doubt, and the Sakkaya Ditthi, holding the view of finding the self in any one of the, or combination of the five aggregates. And so my feeling is that, and this is only my idea, not what I was taught, is that one who does not yet have stream entry should really reflect and think about these three categories as a priority. And whichever one is alive to them, where they feel there's the promise to have a breakthrough by practicing, aiming for breaking one of these fetters, that could be a priority. For myself, the Panchupadana Kanda has been the most important teaching that was meaningful to me for the first 15 years of my 17-year career as a monastic, and I just I guess what is attracting me to an ever evolving understanding of different facets and nuances of understanding the significance of this teaching, Panchupadana Kanda Dukkha, and I just have an idea that one who wishes for stream entry could focus their efforts in that way. The other two about the belief in rites and rituals and the skeptical doubt is kind of like the Scylla and Charybdis between the extreme of someone who's overly religious, is someone who's thinking that enacting some kind of religious formalities or else enacting some kind of a materialistic perfection with the precepts, that somehow that's going to be the way to their liberation, instead of simply being possibly a precondition which softens the mind and makes it possible to live for wisdom. And then the skeptical doubt is really truly the burden and the sickness of modern times in Western society, that our society has become so skeptical that we may not be able to develop enough confidence that this practice could work for us, that it's even possible that by following these steps that we could realize awakening. And then if we feel that we can't, then what's the use of trying? To my experience, those are like hurdles that are related to the kind of a background or the kind of a starting point that somebody has when they come to the practice that has to be taken care of. But the Sakkaya Ditthi, the coming out of the delusion of the self in within the five khandhas seems really the most central and fundamental aspect of the work that we need to do in order to get a foothold in this practice and in order to obtain stream entry. And so it's for that reason that I prioritize it in that way. It's more like a personal feeling rather than something that I have necessarily been taught by teachers ought to be the priority.
Yes. Both Buddha and Sariputta said that it's translated as the voice of another, and Yoniso Manasikara, looking deeply into the source of one's own delusion. But that translation of the voice of another, it's not actually an accurate translation, because in that Pali compound, it's vada. Vada means speech. So it's hearing someone, like, maybe you're sitting there hearing the Buddha or Sariputta or something, talking. You're hearing that speech, and while you're listening, you're introspecting very deeply on what they're saying, and then it makes sense to you, and you awaken to stream entry. And we can see, if you look in the Vinaya, I think it's in the Mahakanda, there's a whole section of Buddha getting realized and then going to talk to his 5 friends, the 5 ascetics, and then some more and some more and some more. And they're all attaining stream entry while Buddha is giving them a Dharma teaching. And not only that, but most of them, and this includes the 1,000 fire ascetics and the 5 friends and a bunch of other people. It's well over 1,000 people, almost 1,100. They all attain Arahant while listening to the Buddha giving a Dharma talk. So this is why the Buddha talks very extensively in a number of suttas about the Dharma follower, the one, and he actually says, associating with good people, wanting to discuss the Dharma, going over it in your mind, memorizing it just by going, not by sitting there memorizing, but just by going it over and over in your mind, discussing it with others, teaching it to others. There's a whole extensive thing, and that results, as one perfects and understands the Dharma deeper and deeper and deeper, what they've heard, the Vada, from another, eventually it clicks in your mind and opens up your mind, and you attain stream entry. I'm not sure, but I can't remember any place where there's any, like, the person was doing some deep jhana or something and attained stream entry. Now, there is a school, I think it's from Myanmar, where they talk about attaining certain levels of jhana. This level means your stream entry, this level means this level means that. But I don't find that anywhere in the suttas. Everything is mostly insight. And
there is a sutta
yes.
where they attain concentration, and they go through a whole cycle leading up to concentration, and then they are capable of hearing the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah, no, the concentration can add. I'm not denigrating meditation. I think it's extremely important. I meditate. Okay. So, I find it very important to me. I'm not saying that, but it's the, like here in the end, the sutta here.
Okay.
Oops, sorry, I'm on the page. The serenity and insight. It's that samatha, settling down the mind, and then having insight and being constantly aware and watching the mind settle down. That's the insight that breaks the illusion of the habit of mind of just action and reaction, some sense experience, boom, reaction, sometimes boom, some reaction like that. So you settle the mind down, and that gets rid of that. And yes, that contemplation can assist you to see clearly, you know, and it's very important. And obviously Buddha taught a lot about, you know, attaining these states and everything. But I'm just trying to say that it's not magic. It's a clear understanding of what the Buddha is teaching that eventually will cause, let's say, a revolution in your consciousness due to insight. But anyways, again, that's just my view. You know, people can hold any sort of view they want. That's fine. It doesn't, you know, affect anything. Anyways, thank you for
Okay.
giving me time to speak.
Thank you, Richard. Maureen again.
That, yes. Remember in the potter's shed, the Buddha explained to a young man the basics, and then he was killed the poor guy was killed next day. But the Buddha said he'd already attained stream entry.
Yes.
He heard it the one time and it all clicked for him. So yeah, that's all I was going to say.
So this is why we shall read the suttas and listen to the suttas, as well as practicing the Yoniso Manasikara, the wise reflection, to make it real in our own experience, and developing samadhi so that the mind can be able to open for that. Oh, I'm sorry, Venerable Jitendra is going to give one more comment. And we're so pleased and glad to hear a new voice that we haven't heard before in this setting.
I'm not clear about samadhi. In your experience, how do you know that it's that you practice samadhi, or how do you develop your samadhi?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good question, and perhaps we'll have to answer that question next week because we've really gone over the time. I thank you, everybody, for hanging with us and for this wonderful conversation. And so we'll close here.